So, what happens when your brain knows, like, that you are in imminent danger, but your deepest survival instinct tells you the only way to stay alive is to hold on to the very person causing that pain?
Wow. Yeah, that is a heavy question.
It really is. And, well, welcome to this deep dive. And to you, our listener, we are speaking directly to you today
Right.
because you've handed us source material that is honestly just profoundly personal. It's raw and it's incredibly brave.
It takes a lot of courage to share something like this.
It does. You've shared this detailed, very emotional testimony reflecting on a highly complex 10-year relationship.
Yeah, a full decade.
Exactly. And your mission for us, your request is really clear. You've asked for an objective summary, a roadmap essentially to help your brain understand whether to, fix this relationship or find the strengths to finally walk away.
And we really want to approach this with an analytical but deeply, deeply compassionate framework. We're going to try to impartially unpack that intense tension between love, trauma, and, well, survival.
Right, because there are absolutely no sides to take here.
No, not at all. We simply want to honor the vulnerability it takes for you to put your own psychological defenses under a microscope like this.
Yeah, because right from the very first line of your notes, you mentioned that your soul feels, quote, half broken.
That phrase really sticks with you. Half broken.
It really does. And you bring up that old cliche. You know the one, if you love someone, let them go. If they come back, they're yours.
Right. People say that all the time.
They do, but you immediately point out how utterly that phrase just fails you in this situation. Because for you, leaving isn't some romantic test of loyalty.
No, it's much more primal than that.
Exactly. I look at it like telling someone who is like actively drowning to just let go of their life raft to see if it magically floats back to them. I mean, for you, letting go feels like a literal threat to your physical existence.
And that visceral fear, that absolute terror, is the lens through which we have to view this entire 10-year history. Because the fear of letting go isn't just a philosophical disagreement with a cute saying. It's a deeply ingrained neurological response.
Right, it's wired in.
Exactly. When your nervous system equates abandoning the relationship with a complete total loss of self, every single action and reaction is filtered through absolute panic.
So let's look at why you grabbed onto this specific life raft in the first place 10 years ago. Because you enter this relationship hoping not to be hurt like you were in your two previous marriages.
You are cautious.
Very cautious. You write that you were highly analytical, you hesitated, but while he told you what you needed to hear, he was supposed to be your Prince Charming.
Right, the fairy tale.
Yeah, you believe the fairy tale.
And the expectation there was absolute safety. But as reality set in, a really profound disconnect emerged between the fairy tale he promised and the violent behaviors and abuse that actually materialized over time.
It's just so jarring.
It is. And this is where the human brain has to do incredible gymnastics just to survive. Because when the person who is supposed to be your ultimate protector becomes the source of your pain,
The dissonance.
exactly, the cognitive dissonance is just shattering. It breaks your reality.
And you handle that dissonance in a very specific way, according to your notes. Because despite the violence, you actively refuse to label yourself a victim.
That stood out to me immediately.
Right. You explicitly state that accepting the label of victim would mean accepting a life in an abusive relationship and your core moral principles. Like, they simply will not allow that.
Your pride and your morals are rejected entirely.
Exactly. So you reframe his violence. If you fight back, you label it survival, not abuse. It's like you're rewriting the warning labels on poison bottles. If you label the bottle survival instead of abuse, you don't have to violate your own moral code by staying and drinking it.
That is such a good way to put it. Rewriting the label is a brilliant defense mechanism, frankly, but it is psychologically exhausting.
Oh, I can't even imagine the energy that takes.
Right, because by calling it survival, you maintain your agency. You protect your pride. You aren't helpless. You are a fighter in the trenches.
Right, you're actively doing something.
Yes. But the tragic irony of this mechanism is that he actually uses your resilience to validate his own behavior.
Wait, unpack that for a second. How does your survival instinct validate him?
Well, because you fight back, because you put up with it, he uses your endurance to excuse his actions.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. In his mind, the logic becomes, she's still here, she's fighting, so my behavior must not be that bad.
Wow. That is incredibly toxic logic.
It is. The refusal to see yourself as a victim is born of incredible strength, honestly, but it prevents both of you from addressing the actual harm.
Because if it's survival, it's just like a tough situation to weather together.
Exactly. But if it's abuse, it requires an immediate exit. And your conscious mind won't let you stay in an abusive dynamic, so your subconscious simply renames the dynamic.
That makes so much sense. And to understand why your subconscious feels forced to rename the abuse, we really have to look closely at your internal emotional landscape.
Yes, the internal context is everything here.
Because you are very open in your notes, which, again, thank you for sharing, about your diagnosis of borderline personality disorder, or BPD, and your really deep abandonment trauma.
And we have to explain how BPD physically operates to understand your reality here. It's crucial.
Please do, yeah.
Because borderline personality disorder isn't just about having, strong feelings or being sensitive. It actually involves a hyper-reactive amygdala.
That's the brain's fear center, right?
Exactly. So for someone with BPD, the fear of abandonment doesn't just feel like sadness or disappointment. It registers in the brain as a literal threat to your survival.
Which completely explains the regression you describe in your testimony.
Yes, the 3-year-old regression.
Yeah. You write that when you feel abandoned by him, even if he's just like in the next room ignoring you, you feel like a defenseless 3-year-old who just wants to be hugged.
It's an overwhelming physical feeling.
And instead of hugging you, he just tells you to leave.
Right, because the emotional permanence isn't there for you in that moment. For someone without that specific trauma, a partner being in a bad mood in the next room is just, a temporary rough patch.
Sure, you just let him cool off.
Right. But for you, in that moment, the love feels permanently gone. The 3-year-old regression is your inner child surfacing, just desperate for a caregiver to restore a sense of safety.
And the contrast between your intense sincerity in those moments and his casual cruelty is just jarring to read.
Very difficult to read.
You state that you only ever speak from a place of truth. You mean what you say. But to survive his hurtful words during what you call his dark moments, you pretend it's all a game.
Yeah.
You literally tell yourself, he's just playing. You say things to him like, hello, hello, come back, stop being so serious.
What you're deploying there is dissociation.
Dissociation, okay.
Yeah. When the reality of his casual cruelty becomes too dangerous for your nervous system to process, you alter reality.
You force a shift.
Exactly. You turn a deeply painful rejection into a playful game as an emergency circuit breaker. It distances your inner 3-year-old from the immediate burning emotional danger of being unloved.
Because if you were to take his words seriously, you described falling into a dark, black wall.
The total collapse.
Yeah, the devastation would be absolute. But I have to ask, how long can a person sustainably trip that emergency circuit break? Like, how long can you trick your own nervous system by pretending a knife wound is just a tickle fight before that black wall just crushes you completely?
The short answer is you can't sustain it.
Right.
You really can't. And that's exactly why you are experiencing such profound, bone-deep exhaustion 10 years in. Your brain fundamentally struggles to comprehend how he can say horrific things that he claims he doesn't mean just because he's frustrated.
Because you don't do that.
Exactly. You're trying to apply your internal rules of strict sincerity to a partner who uses words as weapons of convenience. The cognitive load of constantly translating his abuse into a game, it's draining your life force.
And a brain carrying that kind of massive cognitive load, it just can't handle everyday life smoothly.
No, everything becomes a battle.
Right. So this internal emotional chaos spills over into the mundane day-to-day realities of your relationship. And you detailed some highly specific, tangible conflicts in the notes. Let's look at the communication breakdown because the double standard here is just glaring.
Oh, the anecdote about the door knocking perfectly illustrates this double standard.
Yes. So you hear a noise outside the door, you ask him about it casually, treating it like harmless gossip.
Just a normal question.
Yeah. And he immediately gets intensely defensive and tells you to go open the door and ask them yourself.
Very aggressive response.
Right. But then on another occasion, when you gossip about a third party, he plays right along.
Yeah.
And when you ask him to explain the difference, like why one scenario is okay and the other triggers his anger, he just talks in circles.
And we have to be clear here, this isn't just poor communication skills.
No.
No, it's a calculated mechanism of control.
Control, really?
Absolutely. By constantly shifting the goalpost and refusing to explain the rules of engagement, he keeps you entirely off balance.
Oh, I see.
You're left exhausted trying to solve a puzzle where he holds the only key and he just changes the shape of the pieces on a whim. It's a very subtle but very real form of gaslighting.
Okay, here is where my brain hits a huge roadblock when reading your notes. Let's talk about the financial dynamic.
Let's do it.
Because you hold all the tangible cards here. He hasn't worked for nearly 10 years. He doesn't want to.
Right.
You provide for everything, the housing, the resources, and you have your own children to take care of as well.
Yes, you are the sole provider.
So if someone is treating you this way, constantly changing the rules of reality, and you have all the financial power, why not just pack up your resources and leave? Why tolerate him demanding money, or worse, criticizing how you spend your own money on your own kids?
It's a great question. But it comes down to the fact that financial power does not override emotional dependency.
Even when you're paying for literally everything.
Even then, especially when trauma bonding is involved. Look, in a healthy partnership, tangible resources and emotional support are somewhat balanced, right?
Yeah, there's a give and take.
But here, the power is wildly asymmetrical. Because you hold all the tangible power, the money, the housing, he feels fundamentally inadequate.
Okay.
So he compensates for his lack of financial control by exerting extreme emotional control.
Wait, so he uses emotional unpredictability to neutralize her financial power?
Precisely. He withholds clarity, he shifts the rules, and he deliberately violates the clear boundary you set regarding your children.
Which she specifically asked him not to do.
Right. He criticizes your spending on them because your children are something you care about deeply that he doesn't control. It is his way of asserting dominance in a dynamic where he is, practically speaking, entirely dependent on you.
And that triggers you to just throw your financial support in his face when he crosses that boundary.
Which is a very understandable reaction.
Yeah, it becomes a weapon. But it sounds like a weapon of desperation, not actual power. You state in your notes that you are, quote, fine with him not working.
But the resentment practically vibrates off the page.
It really does. It's like paying the rent for the person who keeps changing the locks on your own house.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that resentment is your conscious mind fighting back against the trauma bond. You know the arrangement is completely unfair, but your abandonment trauma forces you to keep paying the rent, so to speak, to ensure he doesn't leave.
God, that friction perfectly explains why you've made a definitive, self-protective choice about your long-term trajectory.
Yes. The decision about the future.
Because the day-to-day is so fraught, you actively refuse to build assets or a shared life with him. You use the Spanish phrase, construir nada, build nothing.
The refusal to build is a massive subconscious signal.
You acknowledge there are moments of great happiness, right? Moments where you feel incredibly comfortable with him. But there is absolutely no shared plan for the future.
Not at all.
You anticipate that you will eventually break up. And you explicitly state you don't want to build anything so that you won't have to fight over possessions when the end comes.
It's pure self-preservation.
It's like you've lived in a house together for 10 years, but you explicitly refuse to buy any furniture because you're just sitting there waiting for the roof to cave in.
That's spot on. Consciously, you are asking for a roadmap to see if the relationship can be fixed. Subconsciously, your bags are already packed.
Wow.
Living in a state of anticipated grief is your brain's way of cushioning the blow for when the abandonment you fear so much finally happens.
Which brings us to what might be the most profound moment of self-awareness in your entire testimony.
The father figure realization.
Yes, you write that you fear you don't actually view him as a man or a partner, but rather as the father you never had.
And that single realization unlocks the mechanics of this entire 10-year dynamic.
It really makes everything click into place.
It does. Seeking a father figure perfectly explains the tolerance for a completely one-sided dependent relationship. It explains the financial caretaking you are subconsciously trying to earn a parent's unconditional love by providing for them.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
And most importantly, it explains the regression to a 3-year-old state when you feel abandoned. You aren't just looking for an equal partner to stay, you are begging a parental figure not to leave you in the dark.
Okay, let me stop you there because I have a crucial question about this realization.
Sure.
You mentioned in your notes that you need him to know exactly why you are leaving so you don't repeat the mistakes of your second divorce where your ex claimed he was totally surprised by the split.
Right. The need for him to understand.
Yeah. So is this sudden realization that he's a father figure the ultimate breakthrough you need to finally leave? Or is it just another highly intellectual distraction to keep you from having to pack your bags today?
It's a tough pill to swallow.
Mm-hmm.
But the desire to make him understand perfectly is a trap. Yes, You want validation. You want him to acknowledge the reality of the painful roadmap you've been forced to walk. You want the parental figure to finally see your pain and say, I understand why you have to go.
But he's not going to do that, is he?
Exactly. The danger here is that you are making your departure entirely contingent on his comprehension.
Okay, let's synthesize this deep dive and give you the roadmap you actually asked for. When we look at the entire landscape of your testimony, the map reveals a very clear, continuous cycle.
It's a loop. And the cycle begins with hoping for a fairy tale and believing his words over his actual actions.
Right. And then the reality of pain and violence sets in. Because of your core moral principles and the intense neurological panic of your abandonment fears, you reframe that pain.
You label it a game or survival to protect your inner child from that black wall of devastation.
And then that internal dissonance bleeds out into clashes over daily realities. The shifting rules of communication, the financial resentment, the boundary violations with your kids.
It infects everything.
It does. And finally, to protect yourself from the inevitable collapse, you intentionally stole the future. You build nothing. You just endure the exhausting space between moments of intense joy and dark, violent low points.
And that is the objective reality of the 10-year map you've laid out for us.
Yeah.
It is a closed loop.
Yeah.
Recognizing that you are walking in circles is the very first step in deciding whether you want to continue on this path or step off it entirely.
We really want to validate how incredibly hard you are working to find clarity here. It takes immense courage to put your trauma, your BPD, and your relationship dynamics under a microscope like this.
Absolutely.
But as we wrap up, we want to leave you with one final challenging thought to mull over. It's a concept that isn't explicitly written in your text, but it's just the undeniable shadow hanging over everything we've discussed today.
It all comes back to your exit strategy and that deep need for him to understand.
Right. You've been asking for a map to ensure he understands exactly why you might leave. You want everything documented, analyzed, and perfectly explained so he won't be surprised.
You want to make sure he can't say he didn't see it coming.
Exactly. But what if the hardest truth on this roadmap isn't about making him understand?
What if his understanding isn't a prerequisite for your freedom?
Yeah. What if waiting for his perfect comprehension is actually the final trap keeping you from walking out the door?
It's a powerful question to ask yourself.
At the very beginning of this deep dive, we talked about you clinging to a life raft because you felt like you were drowning in the middle of the ocean.
Right, the terror of letting go.
But maybe the realization you need isn't figuring out how to perfectly explain to him why you're letting go of the raft. Maybe the realization is looking around, putting your feet down, and noticing that the water is only 3 feet deep. You can just stand up and walk away.